Good evening. This is Faith Matters, and I am David Hennessy. Several months ago, I spoke by phone for quite some length with Eddie Trask from Boise, Idaho. Eddie is the host and founder of a very successful YouTube channel called Catholic Recon. It was a refreshing experience speaking with him. He spoke frankly and openly about his excessive drinking and addiction to pornography. He left the Catholic faith and began searching for the ideal church when he was very young. After many years of belonging to a megachurch, feeling disillusioned, he set out to study for what for me is, in an admirable and exemplary way, the multiple strands of Christianity and the main church groupings which grew out of the Reformation. Not feeling satisfied and prompted by the Holy Spirit, he took to studying the Church Fathers and the first centuries of Christianity. This brought him full circle with a deeper understanding and appreciation back to the Catholic Church. This, in fact, reminded me of a comment I read somewhere. When a non-Catholic Christian studies history, he or she will convert to the Catholic Church. Since his student years, Eddie had begun drinking heavily and had become addicted to pornography. This addiction continued even while he was married. A vivid spiritual experience while out walking led him to an excruciating and ultimately healing conversation with his wife. As in the case of all addictions, the Lord is the great healer and liberator. In Jesus, Eddie found his freedom from both drink and pornography. He began his career as a wine merchant in the Napa Valley. He holds an MBA from Sonoma State University and is currently pursuing an MA in theology at the Augustine Institute. He serves now as Executive Director at Catholic Charities of Idaho. His YouTube channel, which I certainly recommend, is called Catholic Recon, and it exists to share testimonies from Catholic reverts and converts. His book, Confession All, A Humiliating, Tormented Pilgrimage to God's Will, very aptly named, was released in 2020 and can be found on Amazon.com. Well, Eddie, it's a joy to be speaking to you across the Atlantic. I hate to think of the terrible hour it is over there with you, but here we're well into the afternoon, so tell me, what time is it over there, Eddie?
It's 7 in the morning. That's not too bad.
And are you actually at work?
I am. I am at work.
You're an example to us. We get going at about 9, sort of half asleep still, you know. But
yeah, the rest of my staff gets going around 9, but they stay a little bit later, and I like to get home to see my wife and kids around 5:30 or so.
Yeah, that's great. That's great, Eddie. Well, you're in Boise, Idaho?
Yes.
Wow.
Boise.
Tell us a little bit about Boise.
Boise is a destination for many people from many different states, my family included, who moved from California, but it's a destination because you really get to experience all the seasons here. You get your snow, and you get hot summers, and you get these beautiful autumns. I don't know that I've seen anything quite like it. I know it's beautiful on the East Coast in America as well, but out here, people just come here because they can do things throughout the year, and they can really soak up the activities and the changes in weather. It's beautiful out here.
Oh, that's great. And Eddie, tell me about yourself. Start wherever you want to start.
Sure. I was raised in what's called Central California, in a town called Kerman outside of Fresno. And where I grew up, you could either take the faith or you could drop the faith. There were a lot of people that surrounded me, a lot of my friends and a lot of the families that raised their children much the same. You'd go to church, you'd try to keep the kids in line, and all of us would just goof off. And I remember some of my earliest memories were after going to church, after going to Mass, just goofing off with my friends, just constantly, and just laughing. So in that community, it was so small. Everyone knew each other. I mean, really small. The population of that town was probably 5,000. And there were a lot of good memories related to church, but it was related to the community of my friends. But my parents, they were trying very hard to raise my brother and I in a certain way to try to get us to see the special church, the beauty behind the church. But what was interesting is that when my parents got married, my dad was not Catholic, but he agreed to raise us Catholic. And it wasn't until he was it wasn't until I was about 10 or 11 that he went to, I don't know what you call it in Ireland, but here we call it a yard sale. People are trying to get rid of different things that they don't use anymore, and so they just put them out in front of their house for a discount. And my dad found the St. Therese of Lisieux book, Story of a Soul, and by the time he finished the book, he said, "That's it. I need to become Catholic." And I mentioned that part of the story. I could tell that things shifted in a way. I could tell that he was so much more involved in the faith, and it shifted things in their marriage. Now, that was right before I became a teenager. And as a teenager, it was easy because of that comment I made earlier to join the community, to get back with my friends and care more about them and their wants and needs than anyone else. So I started them. And I have to mention also, I kind of skipped over it, I received all the sacraments that I could have received, confirmation, baptism, reconciliation, etc. But I just remember a big chunk of my childhood was caring so much about what friends were doing and wanting to be cool, wanting to spend all my time with the cool kids. And what inevitably happened was the cool kids do things that I knew the church was telling me, my parents were telling me I should not do. And that includes drinking alcohol, smoking some marijuana, just acting like, as I would say, acting like morons that had no clue about obedience to anything. Just run off and do your thing. You're going to be just fine. Just do your own thing and everything will work out. Well, that continued into college. And here I am trying to get serious about my life. I'm trying to figure out what can I do in this life that's going to be, according to the Lord's will. But I don't know that I actually thought those words. I don't know that I told myself what is God's will. I was searching. Like, what is it that I am drawn to? What's going to make me happy? And inevitably, it led to some type of structure. People would say, "Oh, Eddie, he goes to school. He does his job. He takes all of his courses. He does pretty good work." But after all of that, after all the structure would come all this chaos. So I started to get further and further from the church. I mean, probably by the time I'm in college, I'm going once or twice a year, potentially. And I start drinking a lot. And in the midst of that drinking and wanting to just be, again, with the cool kids, my uncle committed suicide. And he, at that time, was a very close friend of mine. He actually taught me a lot in those first few years in college because I moved up to live with my grandfather and my uncle was around. Well, once I heard of the suicide, I spiraled out of control. In hindsight, I was waiting for something to go horribly south so that I could justify doing whatever the heck I want and then use that as the excuse. Oh, poor me. As if my uncle wasn't going through absolute hell himself for decades before this happened. I started saying, "Oh, look at me, poor me. Now I can go get blackout drunk. Now I can go fornicate, which before marriage, having sex and not caring about anyone or anything. And now I can basically go in on myself, which is a way of saying, I'm just going to be so obsessed with my needs and my wants that I don't care. I don't see anyone else, and who cares about it? I can view pornography whenever I want, masturbate whenever I want, act like an animal in a sense, in a very real sense, and not worry about consequences, because I shut off that part of my soul, really. I shut off, even my intellect, as the church talks about, was getting darker and darker as I got further and further into mortal sin. And because it was so shut off, I didn't even think, oh, I need to return to something good. I was so gone and so closed off to that. I just went about life thinking, this is how people live.
What age were you? Sorry, Eddie, for interrupting. What age were you at this time?
No, please. This was really big. So my uncle passed when I was 22, and this continued pretty heavily until I was 26. Now, the drinking, the pornography, some of that went back to my teenage years. It was just getting amplified after my uncle passed away. Yeah. So, 22 to 26. I finally meet my future spouse when I was 25. And so I hid all of this. The last bit.
Tell me, Eddie, by this time you'd finished college. What did you study at college, and when did you finish? What age were you? 23, 24, I suppose? Or?
Yeah, I finished at 23, and my undergrad degree was in graphic design. And then I went on a few years later, probably when I was 26, I think, I started pursuing a master's in business. So those were the degrees.
And when did you start working?
I was working probably from the time I was 17 all the way through pretty much my entire life, with the exception of one time where I had a job that I clearly was over my head, and I ended up just quitting the job and took probably 3 or 4 months off. And it's funny, as I think of that episode, it was also tied to just caring about how are people going to view me. I need to be the cool guy. I need to be the guy that's doing everything right. So I just dropped the job, and it was not good. Something inside of me knew that quitting was just it's not a good habit. It's not a good response to things. In hindsight, I recognize that all through those years, it was coping. I didn't know how to cope with things. So I would either escape by drinking, or I would escape something by quitting. So whether it was a job, or I remember if anything was too difficult, even doing manual labor, if something was too difficult for me, I would just check out and say, you know what, forget this. I'll just leave it alone. And during that time, I was getting weaker. Obviously spiritually, but emotionally weaker, and closing myself off to so many people, not letting anyone see who I really am. They would all see a facade, and they seemed to like the facade, but it was so superficial. All the conversations, all the relationships were just so shallow. And again, this is all in hindsight. In the moment, I thought I was really cool. I thought I was doing everything quite well. So.
And when you started working, when you finished college, when you finished your undergraduate degree and started working, I think you were in the wine business, were you?
Yes. I ended up pursuing a job that got me into the wine industry, and I was there for 10 years.
You were in the Napa Valley, were you?
I was in the Napa Valley, and here I am, newly married in the industry. What happens in that industry, unsurprisingly, there's a lot of drinking, and there's a lot of drinking at really early hours, because you have to taste the wine, right? You have to taste. If you're running a winery or if you're in leadership, you need to always taste wine, see how they're developing. Well, for someone that didn't really have a grasp on moderation, the sampling was a nice gateway for me to just keep drinking and drinking and drinking. And in the wine industry, I rose quickly. I ended up helping launch 3 different wine businesses. One of them was an actual winery, and then the 2 other ones were digital, in the digital space startups. And through all of it, you're getting handed bottles of wine, and there is a culture of partying. Like, you got to be out there, you got to be partying. So I through all those years, I was hiding myself completely. So my wife didn't know any of these things about the secret alcoholism, really. And
So she didn't.
no, she didn't. I was clearly a two-face, a con man of sorts, just saying I'm one person when I'm at work and kind of these outside functions. And then by the time I get home, I can play it off like everything is just fine. Yeah.
So you were drinking, but you didn't drink at home.
I didn't really drink at home. And even if I did, it was with her, and we wouldn't drink a lot. It was always, I couldn't wait for the next function, the next party, the next wine tasting, and then that's when I would do my drinking. It was really odd. And then I would travel sometimes for work, and that's in America, we say that's when the wheels came off. That's when I would drink so much. It was to make up for lost time. I didn't say this earlier, but binging. So when I talked about Eddie was the guy with structure, I was the guy that, could hold a job and go to school every day, all that stuff. On the weekends, that's when I would binge drink until I would black out, just pass out, gone. And then I'd get back up, go to work, go to school. Everything's fine. I pretend, I'm smiling. And then come the weekend, same thing. So it was a very similar situation with my wife. It would be super moderate, the drinking and whatnot. And then come certain times, I would just completely let go of myself and not deal with any of the difficulty.
You were drinking on the weekends, and did your wife not?
Yes.
Did your wife not say anything to you about the drinking?
I was so good, I would say, at hiding. I can't really explain to you how I did it, but when she found out years later, she did what a lot of spouses do when they find out that their husband is doing something, this, that, or the other behind their back. Their first response is often, how could I have been so stupid? How could I have not seen this? So there's something to be said about doing things in plain view, but then the spouse doesn't think there's any issue. The spouse kind of turns off their own switch. Oh, this is normal, kind of, and they kind of go with the flow for different reasons. And she knew nothing about my pornography usage, and that was even much more devastating than the alcohol. Much more devastating. I don't know, David, if you want me to kind of talk about that moment where I felt that I needed to share this stuff.
I would very much like you to tell us, Eddie.
So we had been married, my wife and I, for 8 years at the time. And the part that I skipped over was when I met her, she was a practicing Protestant. So she had been raised what's called Seventh-day Adventist and kind of stepped away from that church when she was a teenager, which was convenient for her because her parents had divorced. And she thought, well, I don't have to obey what they want me to do. They've lost their credibility. So she kind of stepped away from the church. We met. I couldn't defend my faith. I barely had faith at that time. So we decided upon getting married that we would go to a non-denominational mega church. It grew into a mega church, which means it grew into almost like a stadium, an arena that would seat, I think, 8,000 people or something. And through those years, our first 7-8 years, we loved that church. I felt that I was growing somehow, even though I was doing all these things behind the scenes. There was a part of me that felt that church was helping me grow. And as the years went on, I responded to the altar call where you go up and you say, I'm ready to give my life to Christ. And I did that several times, and nothing was changing with my sins. I think I was desperately wanting to get out of this hell, out of this prison, but I cared too much about the things that were in the prison to get out. So I just kept raising my hand. Yes, yes, I need the Lord. Yes, I need the Lord. And I'd even cry. And my wife was growing spiritually as well through that period of time. Well, everything started to come to a head when they asked everyone in the congregation, it's time for baptisms next week or in 2 weeks. Who is ready to get baptized? And I raised my hand, completely blind to what my infant baptism meant, the gravity of what it meant to be baptized and what it meant to be born again. I had no clue, sadly.
Eddie, could we go back a little bit and ask you,
yes,
why did you stop going to your church, to the Catholic Church?
Oh, great. Thank you. All those years that I was pursuing alcohol and women and just not caring about others, that slowly led me further and further from the church to where it's really interesting to think about. If you were to track it on a chart, you would see, oh, Eddie went in April. Eddie went in June. Then he went again in September. Then he went again the following April. Then the following, then a year went by before I went. And then 2 years went by. And then before I knew it, I wasn't thinking of the church whatsoever. I had completely left the church. It was this progression out. And I can tell you right now, it was because I was steeped in mortal sin and I was so ashamed that somewhere deep down inside, I said, I cannot face the church. I cannot face love, which is so interesting to think about. I could not face mercy. I wanted to shut it down so I could go my own way, and I don't want to hear from anyone.
So, Eddie, when you decided to go to this mega church, yourself and your wife, at the time, did you not say, did you not think of going back to the church, to your church, to the Catholic Church?
No. So she, rightfully so, asked a simple, basic questions about the faith, because she was thinking, if you call yourself a Catholic, can you tell me about the church? And all I did was get angry because I couldn't respond to her questions. I got angry. And after those conversations, I felt like a loser, like an idiot that could not answer. Couldn't defend his own upbringing. So I, in a sense, caved and realized, well, I think I need church, something, so I might as well go with her and we'll find the right church. I think that's what happened.
So it wasn't a sort of conscious thing. The church is I don't like it, I'm fed up of it, this and such a thing happened and so, all that.
No. It was purely based on me shutting down, and there's a lot of cowardice in that. There's a lot of fear in that, and a lot of shame as well.
In fact, it sort of happened. It just happened, rather than you saying, I'm not going back to the Catholic Church because this and this. It just happened because of your lifestyle.
Yes, I tell people it happened organically. I wasn't fully aware of the gravity of what I was saying no to. I just thought over time, well, you can go to different churches. You can do what you need to do. And I can tell you, in America, that is a very, very real sentiment, that many people my age and other ages walk away from the church, end up in some other Christian church, and then turn around and tell the Catholics, it doesn't matter. We're all pursuing our own truth. We're all doing our own thing. And are we good people? If we're good people, then everything's fine. And so I heard that a lot over the years and didn't inspect it, didn't question it. And that's true because that's how I was behaving. That's how I was acting. So why would I question something like that if I was right in the middle of it?
Well, that's all we have time for today. I look forward to having you back at the same time next week, when I will continue my conversation with Eddie Trask. For now, good night and God bless.